My daughter-in-law went crazy when I refused to give her the money from the sale of my ranch. Learn to share. You'll be dead soon anyway, she snapped. My son grabbed her arm and punched me hard in the nose. 10 minutes later, I made them regret they were ever born. I'm glad to have you here too. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought my own son would break my nose over money. But there I was, standing in my kitchen, at 63 years old, blood dripping onto the linoleum floor, while Michael towered over me, his fist still clenched. You're being selfish, Mom, he spat, his face twisted with rage I'd never seen before. That ranch money should go to the family. Beside him, Kayla crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. My daughter-in-law had this way of making even her silence feel violent. She'd been in our family for 3 years now, and in that time, I'd watched my son transform from someone I recognized into this stranger who could hurt his own mother. Learn to share. Evelyn Harper. Kayla said, her voice dripping with contempt. You'll be dead soon anyway. What do you need all that money for? The words hit harder than Michael's fist had. I touched my nose gingerly, feeling the swelling already beginning. The taste of blood filled my mouth metallic and bitter. I worked that ranch for 42 years, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. Your father and I built it from nothing. Dad's been dead for 8 years, Michael snapped. Time to let go of the past and think about your family's future. I almost laughed at the irony. Family's future, as if Michael and Kayla had ever thought about anyone's future but their own. The ranch had sold for $900,000 last month. More money than I'd ever seen in one place, but money I'd earned through decades of early mornings, sleepless nights during calving season, and the kind of backbreaking work that left permanent aches in my bones. Michael, honey, I said the way I used to when he was little and had a tantrum. This money is for my retirement. I've already told you I'll help with the house down payment when I can. When you can. Kayla's voice pitched higher. You're sitting on almost $1 million while we're living in that tiny apartment. Do you know how embarrassing it is when my friends ask why we don't have a proper home? I studied my daughter-in-law's face. Perfect makeup designer handbag slung over her shoulder nails, done professionally. She wasn't exactly suffering. Maybe if you got a job instead of spending your days at the spa, I said before I could stop myself. That's when Michael grabbed my shoulders and shook me hard enough to rattle my teeth. Don't you dare talk to my wife like that, he snarled. She's trying to start a family. She doesn't need the stress of working. The shake made my head spin, but I kept my footing. Michael, you're hurting me. Good. Maybe that'll knock some sense into you. Then his fist connected with my nose and everything went white for a moment. The sound was awful, a wet crunch that seemed to echo through the kitchen. I stumbled backward, hitting the counter, my hand flying to my face. Blood poured through my fingers, warm and sticky, more than I expected. Through the haze of pain, I heard Kayla gasp. But when I looked at her through watery eyes, she didn't look shocked. She looked satisfied. Now look what you made me do, Michael said. But there wasn't any remorse in his voice, just annoyance, like I'd inconvenienced him. I grabbed a kitchen towel and pressed it to my nose, the white fabric immediately turning red. My mind felt strangely clear despite the throbbing pain. Crystal clear, actually, in a way, it hadn't been for months. You need to leave, I said quietly. We're not going anywhere until you transfer that money, Kayla said. All of it. We know you have it sitting in your checking account like some kind of fool. She wasn't wrong about that. The money from the ranch sale was indeed sitting in my regular checking account. I'd been too overwhelmed to know what to do with such a large sum, so I just left it there while I figured things out. But as I stood there, blood soaking through the towel, I realized I'd already figured it out. I'd figured it out, the moment my son's fist connected with my face. "Get out!" I repeated, my voice stronger now. Michael stepped closer, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he might hit me again. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. You're old. You're alone, and you don't know how to handle this kind of money? Let us help you by stealing from me." "It's not stealing," Kayla interjected. "It's family. Family shares. Family takes care of each other." I looked at both of them. Really looked at them, and saw the truth I'd been avoiding for months. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as an obstacle between them and money they felt entitled to. "You have exactly 60 seconds to get out of my house," I said, walking to the landline phone on the kitchen wall. "Or I'm calling the police." Michael laughed, but it sounded forced. "You won't call the cops on your own son." I started dialing 911. Okay, Kayla said, quickly grabbing Michael's arm. "We'll go, but this isn't over, Evelyn Harper. That money should be helping your family, not sitting in some bank account collecting dust." They left through the front door, Kayla's heels clicking angrily on the hardwood floors. Michael slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. I hung up the phone before the call connected and leaned against the kitchen counter, still holding the bloody towel to my nose. My reflection in the window showed a woman I barely recognized, disheveled, bleeding, but with something new in her eyes. Determination. I walked to my bedroom and pulled out the business card I'd kept in my jewelry box for the past few years. Thomas Reed, attorney at law. He'd handled the ranch sale, but more importantly, he'd mentioned something during our last meeting that I'd filed away in the back of my mind. "You know, Mrs. Harper," he'd said, "given your family situation, you might want to consider protecting your assets. There are legal ways to ensure your money goes where you want it to go, regardless of what anyone else thinks they're entitled to." At the time, I'd brushed off his suggestion. Michael was my son. Surely he wouldn't try to take advantage of his own mother. But that was before Kayla's influence had fully taken hold. Before I'd seen the cold calculation in my son's eyes. Before he'd broken my nose in my own kitchen. I picked up my cell phone and dialed Mr. Reed's emergency number. "Mr. Reed, this is Evelyn Harper. I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning." I paused, touching my swollen nose. It's time to implement that plan we discussed. As I hung up, I caught my reflection again. The woman looking back at me wasn't just determined anymore. She was dangerous. And Michael and Kayla had no idea what they'd just awakened. That night, I sat in my empty house with an ice pack pressed to my nose and let myself remember everything I'd tried so hard to forget. Michael hadn't always been like this. There was a time when he was my sweet little boy who brought me dandelions and insisted on helping with the ranch work, even though he was too small to be much help. But that was before his father died, before the financial struggles, before I had to choose between being the mother I wanted to be and the provider I needed to be. Frank's heart attack came without warning on a Tuesday morning in March. One moment he was drinking coffee and planning the day's work. The next, he was collapsed on the kitchen floor, and I was screaming into the phone for an ambulance that arrived too late. Michael was 25, then fresh out of college, and full of plans that didn't include taking over a struggling cattle ranch. He'd wanted to move to the city, work in finance, make real money, as he put it. I couldn't blame him. The ranch barely broke even most years, and Frank and I had mortgaged everything twice over just to keep it running. After the funeral, when the bills started piling up, and I realized how deep in debt we really were, I made a decision that haunts me to this day. I told Michael to follow his dreams. I told him I could handle the ranch alone. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already spoken to Thomas Reed about selling off pieces of our land to pay down the debt. What I didn't tell him was that I spent most nights lying awake, terrified that I'd lose everything Frank and I had built together. Michael moved to Phoenix and got his finance job. For a few years, he called every week, visited for holidays, sent flowers on my birthday. He was building his life, and I was proud of him. even as I worked myself into the ground, trying to save ours. Then he met Kayla. I'll never forget the first time he brought her home. She stepped out of his car wearing white jeans and high heels, took one look at the ranch house, and wrinkled her nose like she smelled something rotten. "This is where you grew up?" she asked Michael, not bothering to lower her voice even though I was standing right there. "It's rustic," Michael said apologetically. "Mom likes the simple life." Simple life, as if struggling to pay bills and working sunrise to sunset was a lifestyle choice rather than a necessity. During that visit, I watched Kayla catalog everything in the house with calculating eyes. She asked pointed questions about property values, inheritance plans, and how much the ranch might be worth if it were sold and developed. "You're sitting on a gold mine," she told me over dinner. "This land could be worth millions if you sold it to the right developer." "I'm not selling," I said firmly. "This ranch is Michael's inheritance, but Michael doesn't want to be a rancher," she pointed out. "So really, you're holding on to something that's not even useful to your family." That night, after they'd gone to bed in Michael's old room, I called Thomas Reed, not about selling the ranch, but about something else entirely. "Thomas, I need to ask you about protecting assets," I said quietly into the phone. "What kind of protection are you thinking about, Evelyn Harper?" "The kind that makes sure my son inherits what I want him to inherit, not what he thinks he's entitled to." There was a long pause. Thomas had known our family for years, had handled Frank's will, had seen me struggle through the financial difficulties after his death. "Has something happened?" he asked carefully. "Not yet," I said, "but I have a feeling it's going to." Thomas explained the options to me. Trusts, foundations, legal structures that could protect money from being claimed by people with bad intentions. At the time, it seemed like overkill. Michael was my son. Surely blood meant something. But over the next 3 years, I watched Kayla systematically change him. She convinced him that his childhood was somehow traumatic because we hadn't been wealthy. She planted the idea that I owed him a better life to make up for his deprived upbringing. She made him believe that his mother was selfish for not sharing everything she had. The changes were subtle at first. Michael started making comments about how I was wasting money on ranch maintenance instead of investing in real assets. He began suggesting that I was too old to live alone, that I should sell the ranch and move into a senior community where I'd be properly cared for. When I resisted these suggestions, Kayla started working on him more directly. I overheard phone conversations where she complained about having to live in that tiny apartment while his mother sat on all that valuable land. I heard her tell him that his mother was being deliberately difficult and that sometimes families had to make hard choices for the greater good. The worst part was watching Michael believe her. My son, who used to defend me against anyone who criticized my cooking or my gardening or my choice to wear jeans instead of dresses, started seeing me through Kayla's eyes. I became the obstacle in his path to the life he deserved. 6 months ago, when I finally decided to sell the ranch, I thought it might improve things between us. I was 63, tired, and ready to stop fighting with equipment that broke down every other week and cattle that seemed determined to escape at the worst possible moments. "I'm selling the ranch," I told Michael during one of our monthly phone calls. Finally, he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "Kayla and I have been looking at houses. There's this amazing place in Fountain Hills that would be perfect for starting a family." "Michael, honey, this money is for my retirement." The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "Mom," he said finally, "you know Kayla and I are struggling. We've been waiting to buy a house so we can have kids. This ranch money could change our lives." "It's going to change mine too," I said gently. "I've never had financial security before. This is my chance." "You don't need much," he said, and I could hear Kayla in the background coaching him. "You live simply. You don't spend money on anything. What would you even do with $900,000? Live without fear, I thought. Sleep without worrying about bills. Maybe travel like Frank and I always planned to do someday. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said, we'll figure something out that works for everyone. That was my mistake. Giving them hope that everyone included them having access to my money. Now sitting in my living room with my broken nose throbbing, I realized how naive I'd been. Michael and Kayla hadn't come here today to ask for help with a house down payment. They'd come to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. All of it. I got up and walked to my bedroom, pulled out Thomas Reed's business card again. Tomorrow morning, I would implement the plan we'd discussed 3 years ago. The plan I'd hoped I'd never need. But first, I had a phone call to make. Michael, I said when he answered. I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am being selfish. Mom. His voice was cautious, surprised. Are you okay? You sound different. I'm fine, honey. Just thinking about family and what's really important. I paused, letting him process that. Why don't you and Kayla come by tomorrow evening? We'll talk about the money. Really talk. Seriously, I could hear him telling Kayla. Hear her excited squeal in the background. Seriously. 7 was tomorrow. We'll figure out how to make everyone happy. After I hung up, I smiled for the first time in months. They thought they'd won. They thought that breaking my nose had finally knocked some sense into me. They had no idea that it had done exactly the opposite. Thomas Reed's office smelled like leather and old money. The kind of place where serious decisions were made by serious people. I sat across from his mahogany desk at 800 sharp. My nose still swollen and bruised purple from Michael's fist. Thomas did not ask about my injuries. He'd been a lawyer long enough to recognize the signs of family violence, and he was too professional to pry. Instead, he pulled out a thick folder labeled Harper Family Trust and spread the documents across his desk. Evelyn, are you absolutely certain you want to do this? He asked, his voice gentle but firm. Once we execute these papers, there's no going back. The money will be completely protected from any claims by Michael or his wife. I touched my tender nose and thought about Kayla's words. You'll be dead soon anyway. What do you need all that money for, I'm certain, I said. Thomas nodded and began explaining the documents. 3 years ago, we'd set up what he called a revocable living trust with very specific terms. As long as I was alive and competent, I controlled everything. But if I ever felt threatened or coerced by family members, I could trigger what he called the protection clause. The $900,000 from the ranch sale will be transferred immediately into the trust. He explained Michael and Kayla will lose any potential claim to it. Furthermore, if they attempt to contest this legally or continue to harass you, they forfeit any inheritance rights entirely. What about my other assets, I asked. Thomas smiled grimly. Your house, your savings, even your car. Everything goes into the trust. They can't touch any of it. I signed the papers with a steady hand. Each signature felt like a small victory, a tiny act of rebellion against the people who thought they could bully me into submission. There's one more thing, Thomas said, sliding another document across the desk. Given what happened yesterday, I took the liberty of preparing a restraining order. If Michael or Kayla threaten you again, we can have it filed within hours. I folded the restraining order and put it in my purse. Insurance. I told myself something I hoped I'd never need but was grateful to have. By 10:00, I was driving to the bank. The transfer took exactly 52 minutes. I watched as my checking account balance went from $903,412 to $3,412. The bank manager, a woman named Paula who'd known me for 20 years, looked concerned. Mrs. Harper, are you sure about this transfer? It's a very large sum to move all at once. I'm sure, I said. It's going somewhere safe. Somewhere Michael and Kayla could never reach it. I spent the rest of the day running errands, buying groceries, acting like a normal person, going about her normal life. But inside, I felt electric with anticipation. Tonight, Michael and Kayla would come to my house expecting to claim their prize. Instead, they'd learned that they'd pushed the wrong woman too far. At 500, my phone rang. Michael's number. "Mom, I tried to call you earlier, but your phone went straight to voicemail. We're really excited about tonight. Kayla's been looking at houses online all day." Of course, she had spending my money in her mind before she'd even gotten her hands on it. "That's nice, honey." I said, "I'll see you at 7. Should we bring anything champagne maybe to celebrate?" The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted to celebrate stealing from me. "Just bring yourselves," I said. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. The same kitchen where Michael had broken my nose less than 24 hours ago. But tonight, it would be the place where I took back control of my life. At exactly 7:00, I heard Michael's car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I watched them get out. Kayla had dressed up for the occasion, a black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. High heels that clicked across my porch like a countdown timer. They knocked, and I let them wait a moment before opening the door. "Mom." Michael smiled broadly and actually tried to hug me. I stepped back. "How's your nose feeling?" he asked, and I searched his face for any sign of genuine remorse. There was none, just impatience barely disguised as concern. "It's fine," I said. "Come in." Kayla swept past me into the living room, her eyes already calculating. "So, Mom," she said, using the title like it tasted bitter in her mouth. "Michael says you've reconsidered our conversation yesterday." "I have," I said, settling into my favorite armchair. "I've thought about everything you said about family, about sharing, about what's really important." Michael perched on the edge of the couch, eager, "And you were right about one thing. Families should take care of each other." I paused, letting them lean forward in anticipation, which is why I've taken steps to make sure my money is properly protected. The confusion on their faces was almost comical. Protected from what Kayla asked, from people who might try to take advantage of an old woman. I said calmly. Michael laughed nervously. "Mom, what are you talking about? We're your family. We're not trying to take advantage of anyone." I reached into my purse and pulled out the bank statement Thomas Reed had printed for me, the one showing my checking account balance of $3,412. "This is my current bank balance," I said, handing the paper to Michael. He looked at it, blinked, looked again. "This can't be right. Where's the money from the ranch? Safe," I said. Kayla snatched the statement from Michael's hands, her face going pale as she read the numbers. "Where is it? Evelyn Harper, what did you do with our money?" "Your money?" I repeated softly. "I'm sorry. I must have missed the part where you worked 42 years to earn it." Michael stood up abruptly, his face flushing red. "Mom, this isn't funny. Where did you put the money?" "Somewhere you can't get it," I said. "Somewhere it's protected from people who think they can break their mother's nose and then demand her life savings." The silence in the room was deafening. I watched as the reality sank in. They'd counted on my weakness, my desire to keep peace in the family, my fear of being alone. They'd never considered that I might be stronger than they thought. "You can't do this," Kayla said, her voice shaking with rage. "That money belongs to this family." "You're right," I agreed. "It does belong to this family. It belongs to me." Michael started pacing, running his hands through his hair. "There has to be a way to reverse this. You can call the bank, transfer it back." "I could," I said, "but I will not." "Why are you doing this to us?" Kayla demanded. "We're your son and daughter-in-law. We're supposed to be a team." I stood up slowly, every muscle in my body feeling strong and sure for the first time in years. "Yesterday you told me I'd be dead soon anyway," I said to Kayla. You stood in my kitchen and watched your husband break my nose and you looked satisfied. You called me selfish for wanting to keep money I earned through decades of hard work. I turned to Michael. And you, my son, my only child, decided that violence was an appropriate way to get what you wanted from your mother. Mom, I'm sorry about yesterday, Michael said quickly. I was just frustrated. I did not mean to hurt you. Yes, you did, I said simply. You meant every bit of it. You both did. Kayla's mask finally slipped completely. You're a bitter old woman who cannot stand to see anyone else happy. That money could have given us a real life, a real future. Then I suggest you go earn your own money for your real future, I said. This is not over, Michael said, his voice taking on the same threatening tone from yesterday. We will fight this. We will get lawyers. I smiled and pulled Thomas Reed's business card from my purse. You're welcome to try. My lawyer is Thomas Reed. I'm sure he'd be happy to explain to your lawyer exactly how ironclad this trust is. Michael grabbed Kayla's arm. Come on, we're leaving. Good idea, I said, following them to the door. Kayla turned back one last time, her face twisted with hatred. You'll regret this, Evelyn Harper. When you're dying alone in some nursing home, remember that you chose money over family. I chose protecting myself over enabling people who wanted to hurt me, I corrected. There's a difference. After they left, I double-locked the front door and drew the curtains. Then I sat in my living room and smiled. For the first time in 3 years, my house felt peaceful. I slept better that night than I had in months. No anxiety about bills, no worry about whether Michael would call with another emergency that required my financial help. No fear that I'd end up destitute in my old age because I'd given everything away to people who saw me as nothing more than a source of money. When I woke up at 6:00 in the morning, my phone was already buzzing with missed calls. 15. From Michael, 8, from Kayla, and several from numbers I did not recognize. I made myself coffee and listened to the voicemails while watching the sunrise through my kitchen window. Mom called me back. We need to talk about this trust thing. There has to be a way to fix this. Michael's voice was strained, desperate. Evelyn, this is ridiculous. You're being manipulated by that lawyer. Call us. That was Kayla trying to sound reasonable but failing to hide her fury. Mom, please. Kayla's pregnant. We need that money for the baby. Michael again. And I nearly dropped my coffee cup. Pregnant. That explained the sudden urgency, the increased pressure, the violence. They were not just planning to spend my money on a house. They were planning to spend it on a baby they could not afford. I deleted all the messages without returning the calls. At 9:00, Thomas called. Evelyn, I've already received 3 calls from lawyers this morning asking about your trust. Word travels fast in legal circles. Are we protected? I asked. Completely. I've faxed copies of the trust documents to all 3 firms. They'll explain to their clients that there's no legal avenue to contest this, assuming Michael and Kayla told them the truth about what happened. And if they did not tell the truth? Thomas chuckled grimly. Then their lawyers will figure out the truth pretty quickly when they see the medical photos from your hospital visit yesterday. I'd forgotten about that. When the pain in my nose became unbearable around midnight, I'd driven myself to the emergency room. The doctor had taken pictures of my injuries for the medical record, and I'd told the attending physician exactly how they'd occurred. Thomas, there's something else you should know. Michael left a voicemail saying, Kayla is pregnant. That changes nothing legally, Thomas said. But it does explain the desperation. A baby is expensive, and they probably thought your money would solve all their problems. Their problems are not my responsibility, I said. No, they're not. But Evelyn, I want you to be prepared. People do desperate things when they feel cornered. Make sure you're taking precautions. After I hung up, I drove to the hardware store and bought new locks for all my doors. Then I stopped by the police station and filed a report about the assault just to have it on record. Officer Erica looked at my bruised face with undisguised anger. The officer who took my statement was a young woman named Erica, who looked at my bruised face with undisguised anger. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges?" she asked. "Not yet," I said, "but I want this documented in case I need it later." She nodded and handed me a copy of the report. "If they contact you again, call us immediately. Elder abuse is a serious crime." Elder abuse. The term made me wheeze, but I suppose that's what it was. My own son had committed elder abuse against me. When I got home, Michael's car was in my driveway. He was sitting on my front porch, his head in his hands. When he saw me, he stood up quickly, and I noticed he looked terrible. His hair was unwashed, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed. "Mom, thank God you're here. I've been waiting for 2 hours. You need to leave Michael," I said, not getting out of my car. "Please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. 5 minutes and then I'll go." Against my better judgment, I got out of the car, but I kept my keys in my hand and stayed close to the driver's door. "I'm listening," I said. "I know I messed up yesterday. I know hitting you was wrong, and I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry, Mom. I have not slept all night thinking about it." He did look genuinely remorseful, but I'd seen Michael apologize before. He was good at it when he needed something. "I accept your apology," I said. "Now leave." "Kayla's pregnant," he said quickly. 3 months along. We found out last week, and that's why we have been so stressed about the house situation. We cannot raise a baby in that tiny apartment. "Congratulations," I said. "I'm sure you will figure it out." "Mom, please, we need your help. Not all the money, just enough for a down payment. $50,000. That's nothing compared to what you have." "I do not have anything." I said that money is in a trust now, and I cannot access it even if I wanted to. That was not entirely true. I could access the money, but only for my own needs and only with Thomas Reed's approval. But Michael did not need to know that. "There has to be a way," he said. "Cannot you call the lawyer? Tell him you changed your mind." "I have not changed my mind." Michael's face started turning red again, the same color it had been right before he hit me. "You're really going to let your own grandchild grow up in poverty because you're angry at me? Your child will not grow up in poverty unless you choose that for them," I said. "You have a job, Michael. Kayla can get a job. People raise children all the time without relying on their parents' money." "It's not that simple," he said. "Kayla cannot work while she is pregnant. She has morning sickness, and the doctor says she needs to avoid stress." I almost laughed. Kayla had seemed perfectly capable of creating stress for other people. "Michael, you're 33 years old. You've been out of college for 6 years. If you cannot support a family by now, that's not my fault. We have been waiting for the right time, the right circumstances. We thought you could depend on my money," I finished. "You thought you could plan your life around inheriting from me before I was even dead." He opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again. We both knew it was true. "This is not just about me," he said finally. "This is about Kayla too, and the baby. Are you really going to punish an innocent child because you're mad at us?" "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm protecting myself and my assets from people who think they are entitled to take them by force." "We never meant for it to go that far yesterday," Michael said. "Things just got heated. It will not happen again." "You're right." I said it will not happen again because you will not have access to me or my money. I started walking toward my front door, but Michael followed me. "Mom, wait. What if we agree to pay you back? We could set up a payment plan. Make it official." I turned around to face him. "Michael, yesterday, you broke my nose because I would not give you money I earned. Today, You are standing on my porch trying to negotiate with me like I am some kind of bank. Do you see the problem here? I see that you are my mother and I need your help, he said, and I see that you are a grown man who thinks he can abuse his mother and then ask her for favors, I replied. Michael's phone buzzed and he glanced at it. His face went even paler. I have to go, he said abruptly. But this is not over, Mom. We will find a way to work this out. After he left, I called Thomas Reed. They are not going to give up easily, I told him. I did not think they would, but Evelyn, the trust is bulletproof. Even if they somehow convinced a judge that you were mentally incompetent, which they cannot, the money would go to the charity beneficiaries we named, not to them. That evening, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. Is this Evelyn Harper? The voice was female professional. Yes, this is Emily Porter from Porter & Keller. I represent Michael Harper and Kayla Harper. They've asked me to contact you about a family trust that may have been established under duress. I almost hung up, but curiosity got the better of me. I was not under duress when I established the trust, I said, but I was under duress when I decided to activate it. There was a pause. Mrs. Harper, I think there may have been a misunderstanding about the circumstances surrounding this situation. The only misunderstanding is that Michael and Kayla thought they could intimidate me into giving them money. I said they were wrong. I hung up and blocked the number. An hour later, Michael called from Kayla's phone. Mom, we fired the lawyer. This whole thing got out of hand, and we just want to work it out as a family. There's nothing to work out. I said, Kayla wants to apologize to you. She feels terrible about everything she said yesterday. I doubted that, but I was curious to see what kind of performance Kayla would put on. Put her on the phone, I said. Actually, she wants to apologize in person. Can we come over tomorrow? No, I said immediately. Mom, please, just give us one more chance to make this right. I thought about it for a moment. They were going to keep trying different approaches until I made it crystal clear that there was no approach that would work. Fine, I said. Tomorrow at 10:00 in the morning. But Michael, if either of you raises your voice to me, threatens me, or touches me in any way, I will call the police immediately. Of course, he said quickly. Thank you, Mom. You will not regret this. But as I hung up the phone, I was already planning exactly how much they were going to regret it. At exactly 10:00 the next morning, I watched from my living room window as Michael and Kayla got out of their car. Kayla was dressed more conservatively than usual, a simple blue dress flats instead of heels, her hair pulled back in a modest ponytail. She was playing the part of the repentant daughter-in-law, and I had to admit she was a good actress. What they did not know was that I was not alone. Thomas Reed sat in my kitchen along with a court stenographer named Linda, who was recording everything that was about to happen. I'd learned my lesson about having witnesses to important conversations. I opened the door before they could knock. Hello, Michael. Kayla. I stepped aside to let them in, watching Kayla's face as she took in the modest furnishings she'd always looked down on. Mom, thank you so much for agreeing to see us, Michael said. He looked better than he had yesterday, showered, shaved, wearing a button-down shirt instead of the wrinkled clothes he'd had on. Kayla has something she wants to say to you. Kayla stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression carefully contrite. Evelyn, I owe you a huge apology. I said some terrible things the other day, and I am ashamed of myself. The stress of the pregnancy has been affecting my judgment, but that is no excuse for how I treated you. It was a good performance. If I had not known better, I might have believed she meant it. I accept your apology, I said. Please sit down. I have something I need to tell both of you. They settled onto the couch, sitting closer together than usual, presenting a united front. Michael reached over and took Kayla's hand, and I noticed she was wearing a different wedding ring, something smaller, less expensive than the massive diamond she usually flaunted. Before we discuss anything else, I said I want you both to know that this conversation is being recorded and witnessed. My lawyer is here along with a court stenographer. Michael's face went pale. Mom, why would you need witnesses? We just want to talk. Because the last time we just talked, you broke my nose, I said calmly. I will not make that mistake again. Kayla squeezed Michael's hand, a warning to stay calm. We understand, Evelyn. We just want you to know how sorry we are and to see if there's any way we can work together as a family. I'm glad you brought up family, I said, because there are some things about this family that you do not know. Things I've kept hidden for your own good, Michael. But I think it is time for the truth. I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out a thick photo album I'd never shown Michael before. It was filled with pictures from his early childhood, but also with documents, newspaper clippings, and other papers I'd saved over the years. Michael, what do you remember about your father's death? I asked, setting the album on the coffee table. He frowned. He had a heart attack. You have told me that story 100 times. I told you part of the story, I said. The part I thought a 25-year-old could handle. But you are 33 now, and it is time you knew everything. I opened the album to a page of hospital records and police reports. Your father did not just have a heart attack, Michael. He had a heart attack during a fight. A fight we were having because I'd finally worked up the courage to leave him. Michael stared at the documents, his face confused. Leave him? Why would you leave Frank? I turned the page, revealing photographs that made Kayla gasp audibly. Pictures of me with black eyes, split lips, bruises covering my arms and legs. Pictures that Frank's sister had taken and begged me to use as evidence. Pictures I'd hidden away because I was too ashamed to look at them. Because your father was violent, Michael. He had been for years. The silence in the room was deafening. Michael picked up one of the photographs with shaking hands, staring at the image of his mother's battered face. This cannot be real, he whispered. It is real, I said quietly. Every bruise, every black eye, every accident I explained away when you were little. Your father was an alcoholic who used his fists to solve problems, and I spent 15 years making excuses for him. I turned to another page showing Michael a police report dated 6 months before Frank's death. I finally called the police after he put me in the hospital with 3 broken ribs. I was going to press charges, file for divorce, take you and leave, but then he had his heart attack. And everyone said what a tragedy it was. What a good man he'd been. How I should be grateful for the time we'd had together. Michael set down the photograph, his hands trembling. Why did you never tell me? Because you were grieving your father, and I did not want to destroy your memories of him. Because people told me it would be cruel to speak ill of the dead. Because I thought protecting you from the truth was the right thing to do. I turned to face both of them directly. But watching you both these past few years, seeing the way you treat me, the way you think you are entitled to what I have worked for, it has made me realize something. Michael, you have become exactly like your father. Michael jerked back as if I'd slapped him. That is not true, is it? I asked. You use intimidation to get what you want. You think violence is acceptable when people do not do what you want them to do. You have learned to see me not as a person, but as something that exists to serve your needs. Kayla spoke up for the first time since her rehearsed apology. Evelyn, that is not fair. Michael is nothing like what you are describing. He broke my nose 3 days ago because I would not give him money. I said, how is that different from what his father used to do? I flipped to the final section of the album revealing bank statements and legal documents that made Michael's eyes widen. Here's something else you do not know, Michael. After your father died, I did not just struggle to pay bills because the ranch was not profitable. I struggled because Frank had gambled away nearly everything we owned. The ranch was mortgaged to the hilt. We had credit card debt in the tens of thousands, and the life insurance barely covered the funeral expenses. Michael stared at the financial records. But you always said Dad was good with money. I lied. Your father was terrible with money. He spent everything we had and more on poker games, horse racing, and whatever other gambling he could find. When he died, I inherited $68,000 in debt. I pulled out another document. This is a loan agreement I signed 6 months after your father's death. I borrowed $50,000 from your great-uncle Robert to keep the ranch from going into foreclosure. Uncle Robert helped us? Michael asked. Uncle Robert saved us, I corrected, and I spent the next 8 years paying him back every penny with interest. While you were in college, while you were building your career, while you thought I was just being stubborn about keeping the ranch, I was working 18-hour days to pay off your father's debts and keep a roof over our heads. The room was silent, except for the soft clicking of Linda's stenography machine. Michael looked like he was going to be sick. I never knew, he said finally, because I never told you. Because I wanted you to have a future that was not weighed down by your father's mistakes. Because I loved you enough to sacrifice everything so you could have a clean start. I closed the album and set it aside. But here's what I have realized, Michael. All those sacrifices I made, all that work I did to protect you and give you opportunities, you have learned to take it for granted. You have learned to expect it. And when I finally said no, you responded exactly like your father would have. Kayla shifted uncomfortably on the couch. Evelyn, Michael was just frustrated. He did not mean to hurt you. Frank never meant to hurt me either, I said, but he did it anyway over and over again because he believed his needs were more important than my safety. Sound familiar? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the ranch land I had fought so hard to keep. The money from selling this ranch is not just my retirement fund. I said, it is my freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I have enough money to feel secure. I do not have to worry about bills or debt or what will happen if I get sick. I do not have to depend on anyone else for survival. I turned back to face them. And you want me to give that security away so you can buy a house you cannot afford and raise a child you are not prepared to support? Michael's voice was barely a whisper. Mom, I had no idea about any of this. Now you do, I said. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? He looked at Kayla, then back at me. I do not know. I need time to process all of this. Take all the time you need, I said. But understand this. The trust I established is not just about protecting money. It is about protecting myself from people who think they can use guilt manipulation or violence to control me. I walked to the front door and opened it. I think this conversation is over. Michael stood up slowly, still looking stunned. Kayla followed him, her carefully composed mask finally slipping to reveal the frustration underneath. Evelyn, she said as they reached the door. What about the baby? What about your grandchild? I looked at her for a long moment. Kayla, if you truly want what is best for your baby, you will teach them that they cannot have everything they want just because they want it. You will teach them to work for what they need instead of expecting other people to provide it. And you will make sure they never learn that violence is an acceptable way to solve problems. After they left, Thomas and Linda joined me in the living room. How do you feel? Thomas asked. I sat down in my chair, feeling lighter than I had in years. I feel like I finally told the truth. Do you think it will make a difference? Linda asked. I shrugged. Maybe not. But at least now, Michael knows who his father really was, and who I really am. Whatever he chooses to do with that information is up to him. Thomas gathered his papers. Evelyn, I want you to know that everything you have done here is completely legal and appropriate. You have every right to protect your assets and yourself. I know, I said. For the first time in my life, I am putting my own well-being first, and it feels good. After they left, I sat alone in my quiet house and realized something had fundamentally changed. I was not afraid anymore. Not of Michael, not of Kayla, not of being alone, not of what people might think. I was free. 6 months later, I stood in the living room of my new house, watching movers carry the last of my furniture through the front door. The house was smaller than the ranch property, but it was mine completely. Bought and paid for with money from the trust located in a quiet neighborhood 2 hours away from Michael and Kayla. I had chosen this town specifically because nobody here knew my history. I was not Frank Harper's widow or Michael Harper's mother. I was just Evelyn, a woman starting fresh at 63. The realtor, a cheerful woman named Diane, handed me the keys with a smile. Welcome to Maplewood, Mrs. Harper. I think you are going to love it here. She was right. The house sat on a corner lot with mature oak trees and a garden that the previous owner had lovingly maintained. There was a screened porch where I could drink my morning coffee, a kitchen with windows that let in plenty of light, and a spare bedroom I had already decided to turn into an art studio. Art. At 63, I was finally going to try painting, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for when I was working the ranch or worrying about other people's problems. My phone buzzed as the movers finished unloading. Michael's number. I had kept the same phone number but changed it to unlisted so he could still reach me if there was a genuine emergency. This was the first time he had called since our confrontation 6 months ago. Hello, Michael. Mom. His voice was subdued, different from the demanding tone I had grown accustomed to. I heard from Thomas that you moved. I did. Are you going to tell me where? I considered it for a moment. Not yet. There was a long pause. Mom, I have been thinking about everything you told me about Dad. About the money. About everything. And I owe you an apology, a real one this time. I had no idea what you went through, what you sacrificed for me. I am ashamed of how I treated you. I sat down on my new porch swing, looking out at the peaceful street where children rode bicycles and neighbors waved to each other. Thank you for saying that, Michael. I left Kayla, he said quietly. That surprised me. Why? Because after I learned the truth about Dad, I started seeing her differently. The way she talked about you, the way she pushed me to be more aggressive about getting money from you, it reminded me of the stories you told about Dad, and I realized I did not want to become that kind of person. I felt a small flutter of hope in my chest, but I kept my voice neutral. What about the baby? There was no baby, Michael said, his voice heavy with shame. Kayla lied about being pregnant. She thought it would make you more likely to give us money. When I found out she had been lying, I knew I could not trust her anymore. The manipulation was breathtaking even for Kayla, but I was not entirely surprised. I'm sorry you went through that, I said, and I meant it. Mom, I know I have no right to ask this, but I was wondering if we could maybe start over. Not about money. I understand that's off the table, but maybe we could try to have a real relationship for the first time. I watched a neighbor walk her dog past my new house, the kind of ordinary, peaceful scene I'd been craving for years. Michael, I'm willing to try, I said carefully. But there have to be rules. Anything. First, you never ask me for money again. Not for a house, not for emergencies, not for anything. Not if you need financial help, you figure it out on your own, or you go to a bank like everyone else. Okay? Second, you never threaten me or try to intimidate me in any way. If you cannot discuss something calmly and respectfully, then we do not discuss it at all. I understand. Third, you accept that I am going to live my life the way I want to live it. I'm done sacrificing my happiness for other people's expectations. Mom, I want you to be happy, Michael said. And for the first time in years, he sounded like the little boy I used to know. I want you to have the life you deserve. We talked for another 20 minutes. Michael told me he'd started seeing a therapist to work through his anger issues and his complicated feelings about his father. He'd moved into a small apartment and was learning to budget his money without expecting anyone else to bail him out. He sounded different, humbler, more thoughtful. It would take time to rebuild trust between us if that was even possible. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to my son instead of to someone who saw me as an obstacle to overcome. After we hung up, I walked through my new house planning how I wanted to arrange everything. The art studio would go in the back bedroom with an easel by the window. The living room would be comfortable, but not fancy. I was done trying to impress people who did not appreciate me anyway. That evening, I drove to the town center and had dinner at a small restaurant called the River Diner. The waitress, a woman about my age, struck up a conversation when she noticed I was eating alone. New in town, she asked. Just moved here today, I said. Well, welcome to Maplewood. I'm Helen. I'm Evelyn. The food is wonderful. Thank you. Are you retired, Mus? Newly retired? I said. I'm looking forward to having time for hobbies. You should check out the Maple Center, Helen suggested. They have art classes, book clubs, all sorts of activities. It's a great way to meet people. For the first time in decades, the idea of meeting new people did not fill me with anxiety. I was not worried about what they might want from me or how they might judge me. I was just a woman starting a new chapter of her life. After dinner, I drove home and sat on my porch swing as the sun set behind the oak trees. My phone was quiet. No demands, no emergencies, no guilt trips. The silence was beautiful. I thought about Thomas's words from our final meeting before the move. Evelyn, you have done something remarkable. You have taken control of your life at an age when most people think it is too late to change anything. He was right. At 63, I was finally free. Free from the ranch that had consumed 42 years of my life. Free from the financial stress that had kept me awake at night for decades. Free from people who thought they could manipulate or intimidate me into giving them what they wanted. But most importantly, I was free from the guilt that had defined so much of my life. Guilt about Frank's violence. Guilt about Michael's disappointments. Guilt about not being the perfect mother or the perfect victim or the perfect anything. I'd spent years believing that love meant sacrifice, that being a good mother meant putting everyone else's needs before my own. But I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst behavior. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who do not value you. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, I worried it might be Kayla trying to contact me, but when I read it, I smiled. Hi, Mrs. Harper. This is Diane from the real estate office. I forgot to mention that there is a painting class starting next week at the Maple Center. Thought you might be interested. I typed back quickly. Very interested. Thank you for thinking of me. As I prepared for bed in my new house, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I was excited about the future. Not anxious, not worried, not planning for the next crisis, just excited. Tomorrow, I would start setting up my art studio. Next week, I would take my first painting class. Next month, I might travel somewhere I had always wanted to go. The possibilities felt endless because for the first time, I was making decisions based on what I wanted instead of what other people expected from me. I'd learned that money was not just about financial security. It was about having choices. And I'd learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you are really just trying to control you. But most importantly, I'd learned that it is never too late to choose yourself. As I turned off the lights in my peaceful new home, I smiled. Michael had been wrong when he said I would be dead soon anyway. I was not dying at all. I was finally starting to live. Now I am curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I am leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.